reaction now from Dr. Sabri Saidam, Deputy Secretary General of the Fatah Central Committee, who joins us from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Welcome to the programme. What is your reaction then to this raid on the hospital?
Good morning, good to be with you. Imagine if this happened in London, would it have been acceptable? Israel is breaking international law day in, day out, and is acting in defiance of the recent ruling by the International Criminal Court, which is Justice Court rather, and the insistence on the running mock trials on the West Bank in preparation for future maybe attack on the West Bank. So we believe that this is nothing but an act of terror. This is a continuation of the genocide that's committed against the Palestinian people. And this comes in defiance of the will of the international community to see an end to all this saga. The continuation of attacks in Gaza and the continuation of attacks on the West Bank confirms what Palestinians have been saying almost all the time, that Israel is intentionally operating in the West Bank and Gaza to drive Palestinians out. There's no provocation for this attack whatsoever. The person mentioned, who is not a Fatah loyalist, by the way, but as a Palestinian, I would say this attack was totally, as I said, unprovoked. I guess the man was injured. So how on earth the man would have carried any attack against any civilian, let alone Israeli civilian? So I would say this is all made up for, preparations for future wider scale attack on the West Bank.
You started by asking what would be the reaction in London or Washington. Had that been, had the person involved been planning an attack on a Western capital, then probably a Western country would have acted in the same way, though, that as members of a Palestinian armed group, they would be a legitimate target, no?
Well, let me ask you, does it happen on extrajudicial grounds? The person of interest would have been rounded up in Washington and London, would have been investigated, would have been subjected to a court of law. Instead, Israel just takes the decision and goes and attacks. Imagine if a Palestinian does it in Tel Aviv, would it be acceptable? A Palestinian does it anywhere, would it be acceptable? I think, this extrajudicial killing is nothing but entrenching more and more hatred and building a scene that is so polluted and so distorted in a way that it becomes difficult for mending a situation that's already volatile.
We've had reporting comments at least from Yoav Gallant, Israel's defense minister, suggesting that Israel will retain military control of Gaza after the war, run it in essence in the same way it runs the occupied West Bank. And I wonder what you made of those comments.
Well, again, this is an act of arrogance. The international community at large, not only Palestinians, are saying that this is not acceptable. Everybody is saying that, Palestinian integrity of the Gaza Strip should be maintained. There should not be any shrinkage of geography. There should not be any annexation of land. There's no security controls or security buffer zones, rather, and shouldn't be any Israeli presence in Gaza. So to diffuse the situation and allow the recent Cameron declaration, as we call it, to be fulfilled, of the realization of a Palestinian state to come into being. Such an act is not only in defiance of international law and UN resolutions, but also is in defiance of the will of the international community to see a Palestinian state come into being, as I said. So we believe that Israel is entrenching itself into more and more internal political competition amongst the political rivals in the Israeli cabinet. And if anything, it's deepening the hatred and incitement against anything that is Palestinian. I don't think this is the appropriate future that every Israeli should aspire to see. We would like, people around the world to come together and say enough is enough. This conflict has dragged on far too long, and it's about time to be settled on the basis of UN resolutions and the realization of the two-state solution that's been much talked about. Such statements will serve nothing but undermines that notion.